Today's speaker is Luai. Okay, Luai, over to you.
Okay, I put in here my Instagram handle because I just spoke at Austin City Council and I talked about Zionism and some of the quotes I used there are applicable to this. So very quickly, I think this chapter has a lot of information. Basically, I wanted to talk about like the general themes of things. Dr. Khalidi does a good job talking about his personal life and how his family is rooted in Palestine. And I think that was very important to personalize the book. This chapter goes into like almost like bullet points, 1, 2, 3, 4, why this happened, 1, 2, 3, 4, what happened. He talks about reasons for defeat for the Palestinians. He talks about Arab state fragmentation. He talks about Palestinian fragmentation. He talks about conflicts, although this chapter is like said to be 1947, 1948, but it really touches on stuff all the way from like 1936 all the way up to 1956. So it's actually it's quite deceiving to see that it is only about 1948. It actually covers a good chunk of history. He talks a bit about American hegemony, and the last one is kind of just a reflection on my part, just looking at like 1956 conflict and how that kind of has a lot of themes that are common with what we're seeing in Gaza right now. Dr. Khalidi talks about his family and how they are rooted in Palestine, and I kind of identified with that, especially that his mom is from Jaffa, and that's basically where I am from. Both of my parents are from Jaffa, so he actually inspired me to go and look back because my parents always told me about stuff in my history that I never visited until nowadays. So the picture of the person you see on the left, that's Omar al-Bitar. That's actually my great uncle. And he happens to be the mayor of Jaffa in the early 1900s. So that was a piece of history there. And something else also is that he is the person that in 1937 met with the prime minister of Jordan to tell him that we as Palestinians, we refuse the Peel Commission reports. Because as you know from this chapter, Jordan was in agreement that the Peel Commission should be implemented in order for Jordan to take over whatever remained Palestinian land. On the right, that's basically how people start to preserve their culture and something. One thing they do is actually a family tree. So that's kind of like my paternal family tree, and that's my name here in the green. And a couple of people from my family took it upon themselves to create it, so we are all in touch with each other. It never became so useful for me until this genocide unfolded in Gaza, because I have relatives in Gaza and I know where they are on this tree right now. So I thought I would mention that. Dr. Khalidi goes into reasons for defeat of for the Palestinian people in general, and not realizing the establishment of a Palestinian state. And he goes into different things: foreign intervention, inter-Arab rivalries, Palestinian differences post the Arab revolt, absence of modern institutions, and the global shifts that happened during and after World War II. The Arab states fragmentation, I found this very interesting because I always looked at the Arab states leadership not being so reliable for the Palestinian cause, and I always wondered why that is. There were some obvious answers, such as control by the West and post-colonialism realities and things like that. But he mentioned some concrete examples. For example, I mean, the Arab office that was established in Palestine was not even permitted to go to the Arab League summits, but the only reason it was allowed is because it was friendly to the government of Iraq, which was under the control of the British. So when they felt that they had control over the Arab office, they allowed it to join the Arab League. And the book mentions also that, for example, Hussein al-Khalidi, who was somebody that's pro the Arab revolt, which was antithesis to what Britain wanted. They imposed the Arab office on him, for example. And there was a game of who is who mentioned in the book that you will see that, for example, Egypt, when they basically created the Arab League with the 5 other countries, they suspended any representation by Palestinian representatives, but under the guidance of Britain. And then Britain said, okay, well, we're going to allow the Arab office to join the Arab League or have a representation in the Arab League, which seemed like it's against Egypt's wishes, but Egypt was actually listening to Britain. So Britain was kind of showing who is who in this whole situation. He mentioned some concrete examples, and you probably went through them in the book. Like each country had some kind of a Western, or whether in this case British or American, cozy relationship that basically made sure that their wishes were carried. Jordan, Glob Basha was his house was abutted to the palace. In Egypt, Sir Miles Lamson surrounded Abdin Palace with tanks in order to pick the prime minister, forcing King Farouk to pick the prime minister that was friendly to Britain. He talks about Palestinian fragmentation as well, and I mean it seemed to have been very multipolar. He talks about Mufti Amin al-Husseini. He talks about Hussein al-Khalidi, who's the author's uncle, Musa al-Alami. All of those had kind of different ways of wanting to realize a Palestinian dream, but like he talked about Amin al-Husseini, for example, that he can command an entourage or like a small government or something like that. He didn't want to delegate. He didn't want to grow into a system of governing. Hussein al-Khalidi was for liberation and was pro the Arab revolt. Musa al-Alami had a more cozier relationship with Britain. So you had all these poles that were fighting within the Palestinian reality. But also, we cannot discount that this was by design, controlled by the British in order to weaken any prospect of having a Palestinian state. Palestinian politicians have been faced with exile, with imprisonment. They were banned from organizing. Actually, my great uncle that I talked about, he was imprisoned, actually was taken from Palestine to Cairo, and he was imprisoned for 2 years in Cairo. So, and a lot of examples were mentioned of exile and like Seychelles Islands and stuff like that. You can also contrast that to the Zionist reality, where there were no Palestinian organizations that were allowed to go out to be represented in international arena, or if they show up, they will be in completely unofficial capacity. However, the Jewish Agency was enjoying legitimacy and such abroad. So they were by design hamstrung not to realize any state or government. So this kind of takes the majority of the book, and then toward the end he talks about 1956 war, and he mentioned that basically the first prime minister of Israel was David Ben-Gurion. After him came Moshe Sharet, and the author basically makes Moshe Sharet, sound very mellow comparing to David Ben-Gurion, who really wanted to expand and take over Gaza and like finish the job of 1948. Although one of the quotes I used in my speech about Moshe Sharet is that he actually, as early as in 1914, he basically said that we came not, to take an empty land, but to take over a country with people and that are governed by the virtue of their language and as much as Moshe Sharet might sound like more toward peace and stuff, but he still had some preconceived notions about the people that were occupying the land. The provocations, and like from reading books like Gaza, An Inquisition and Martyrdom by Norman Finkelstein, he talks about a lot of how conflicts usually get started and the series of provocations that happened. Here you have a concrete example of like basically in 1955 when Gaza Strip was under the control of Egypt. Israel went and killed 39 Egyptian officers in Rafah, 72 officers in Khan Yunis, and Egypt did not want to go and retaliate like in your face army to army, because that would be a huge undertaking that they didn't want to do. So basically they encouraged the Palestinian fidaiyin, and there are some Arabic terms. Fidaiyin basically means somebody that like sacrifices themselves, that they will go fight and knowing that they might die. So that's the word fidaiyin means. So if they funded them, they encouraged them to go and do like raids against Israel. So that basically Israel still used that as an alibi to go and invade Gaza. And the story is a little larger because you have Britain and France also engaged in that assault against Egypt. But when everything's said and done, Gaza has suffered 450 people killed by Israel, and Gaza was occupied briefly, and then they left. He talks a little bit about the American hegemony in the region. So there was the 1946 Anglo-American Committee of Inquiry that basically, right after World War II, you have 100,000 Jewish people that were in camps in Europe that are waiting to go somewhere, or I mean, to have some kind of settlement. And although Britain was against taking them to Palestine, America said, no, we're going to take them to Palestine. So that basically shows you how America pushed on, and where Britain was a waning power, and America now is taking over. He talks a little bit about, keep in mind that the aid to Israel from the US did not start until like the 70s. Israel was routinely being condemned in the United Nations, in the Security Council even. So what we're seeing right now is that America is always vetoing and is always with Israel. That's something that did not start until the 70s. He talks about the power shifting between the Soviet Union and the US, basically how the relationship between Israel and the Soviet Union kind of started on a good foot, and then it kind of thawed, and Israel became really an ally of the United States. And last slide I would like to talk about is basically the reoccurrence of themes in Gaza. The disproportionate use of force. Basically, he talks about one raid that killed like 3 Israelis, and then Israel basically went under the leadership of Ariel Sharon at the time, who basically is the responsible person for the massacres of Sabra and Shatila, as we will see in 1982 chapter. But basically, he destroyed 45 houses on top of their inhabitants, the killing of 450 people in Rafah and Khan Yunis, and that all was under basically the umbrella of an occupation. Gaza was occupied in 1956, was occupied in 1967. And I mean, in my view, what Israel wants to do right now is to basically finish that job once and for all, and like take over Gaza, because right now it's becoming uninhabitable. That's really the major themes that I thought were relevant to this chapter. So
you did a brilliant job, Loai. Thank you. It's absolutely brilliant. You managed to summarize, to draw out, to pick out the themes. Thank you. And it's so good to hear about your own history and your own family. And it's a great honor to have a descendant of Palestinians who were expelled in the Nakba from Jaffa to speak to us today, to actually sit with us and study all of this with us together. And I can't tell you how sorry I am, because I grew up in the country that did this to your people. And my grandparents, who were Holocaust survivors, were given a house or a flat in Jaffa when he mentions it in the book, when all those Jews, Holocaust survivors, were allowed into the new state of Israel, they were given a flat in Jaffa. And my grandmother, I remember it because I was a very small child, and sometimes my grandmother used to look after me. And I remember my grandmother saying, when I was a little bit older, that when they entered that flat, there was still food on the stove, still warm food. So the people were expelled with this, probably just the clothes on their backs, if they even stayed alive, if they weren't killed. So it's just disgusting. I think everybody, I don't like speaking for other people, but I can't imagine anybody would think your presentation wasn't brilliant, because it was such a great deal, such an amazing thing you did, summarizing everything and giving us your personal story.
When I reflect on previous couple of decades, I just don't know how people had the patience to keep going. I mean, there were so many leaders that came. I mean, he talked about a couple of them that been assassinated. I mean, Abu Iyad, Abu Jihad. So all of those were assassinated, and then now we got to a point of audacity and impunity that even like if you're negotiating with someone, you can go and target them and kill them off. Like Ismail Haniyeh, when he was killed, I mean, the rumors were that he was on the verge of accepting something that's favorable to Israel. And then when they heard that, oh, he was about to accept, okay, let's assassinate him. Same thing with Hassan Nasrallah. And there's another book that's called Rise and Kill First. And basically it's all about clandestine operations by the Mossad in 8200 and all these agencies within Israel to kill off people. It actually started by kidnapping people that were accused of war crimes during the Second World War, but that developed into basically killing off anybody that that is opposing the state of Israel or perceived to be a threat, and that developed with the technological advancement into surveillance technology, and that's something that ended up getting outsourced to, you know, the Gulf countries. And like we heard about the assassination of Khashoggi of Saudi Arabia, for example, the technology with the Pegasus software and all that was basically imported from Israel. So I mean, there are articles out there and books about how Israel is kind of helping the destabilization of the region and keeping the American hegemony in the area by basically, unfortunately, basically doing dirty work. And that touches on something that's, you know, very personal to me, and a lot of people are seeing it probably here when you see the videos, the TikTok videos by the army or by the armed forces of Israel, the culture of impunity, and how does that affect the society itself? When you see people saying that we are the chosen people, but they're not doing things, let's put it the godly way, being nice to your neighbor, being nice to, you know, or being charitable, or not killing people off just or kicking people out of their homes. I mean, that's a whole different tangent I'm going on, but like it's something that like since we started the discussion, I kind of wanted to bring up this whole thing with the TikTok videos and the demeaning of the Palestinian people, and how is that reflecting of the culture within Israel right now? And has it been like that all along, and we've been just duped until it became so prevalent on social media? Or is this basically the result of right wing after right wing after right wing government coming to the forefront and basically developed from the culture of impunity?
I can only tell you that Israel's goal is to finish its settler colonial project. It means it wants all the Palestinians out and replace all of them, and that includes the Palestinian citizens of Israel, with what Israel calls Jews, which, as I explained, I think in my article, and I might have said it here too, is a racial definition. Israel is a very racist state. It looks at Palestinians and the Jews and everybody else in terms of race. So what makes me Jewish is supposedly my blood, even though I don't believe in anything Jewish. I don't follow Jewish religion. I don't celebrate Jewish festivals. I don't follow any Jewish traditions. I'm not interested in them. I don't believe in them. I'm still Jewish even if I decide to become a Hindu tomorrow, because my blood is what Israel says it is. So it's a hugely religious racist state. It's working on the principle of racial purity, and it wants all the Palestinians out. This is why Israel doesn't want to talk, because talking is only a waste of time for them. There is no real negotiation here. There's no accommodation. There's no agreement. There's no interest in living together with Palestinians, even though fundamentally that would never have been fair for the Palestinians who've been banished from their homeland. But even so, and by the way, the two-state solution has always been a myth. It's never, nobody in Israel has ever, I can tell you that, I can vouch for it. I grew up in Israel. It's always been a ruse to keep the world from seeing the truth, and also to make Israel look kind of semi-reasonable. I can testify to that. Okay, bye everybody. Next Wednesday, same time.